In 2001, Amazon's total annual revenue was $3.1 billion. Last year, it was $575 billion. That growth didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere, from the estimated 100,000 plus retail stores that have closed in the United States since 2001, from the million-plus retail jobs that disappeared with them, and from every shopping experience that used to exist in your town and no longer does. This isn't a video about Amazon. It's a video about what shopping was, what it felt, smelled, and sounded like before one company decided that friction was a problem to be solved rather than a feature of human commerce. 17 ways we shopped in 2001. Some of them were inconvenient. Most of them were better than we realized at the time. And number one on this list wasn't just a place to shop. It was somewhere to be. I make one thing. I find out what the shift to modern technology actually cost us, not just in money, in places, in rituals, in the parts of daily life that disappeared without a funeral. If that matters to you, subscribe now. Number 17. The Sunday Circular. Every Sunday morning, the newspaper arrived with a thick stack of inserts. Best Buy, Kmart, Circuit City, Target. You spread them on the kitchen table and planned the week, not because you needed something, but because browsing had a physical format and a designated time. The circular created anticipation. You circled things. You cut coupons. You talked about what was on sale. Amazon's homepage refreshes in real time and never stops. The Sunday Circular came once a week and felt like an event. Number 16. Driving between stores to compare prices. Before smartphones, if you wanted to know whether Best Buy or Circuit City had a better price on a DVD player, you drove to both. You wrote the prices down on a piece of paper. You made a decision based on incomplete information and trusted your judgment. That process was inconvenient. It was also genuinely engaging, the automotive equivalent of comparison shopping, done in real time with gas money on the line. Price transparency killed the sport of it. Number 15. Layaway. You picked out the item, you paid a deposit, the store held it in the back, and you paid it off over weeks or months. When it was paid in full, you took it home. No credit check, no interest, no debt that outlasted the purchase. Layaway was a financial instrument built around the assumption that you might want something before you could immediately afford it, and that the solution was patience, not a credit card. Walmart brought it back during the 2008 recession because the demand never actually went away. Number 14. The Sears catalog. The Sears Wish Book arrived in October and was immediately claimed by every child in the household. Hundreds of pages of toys, tools, appliances, and clothing, each one photographed with the specific quality of light that makes objects look more real than they are. You ordered by phone or by mail. You waited 3 to 4 weeks. The object you'd been anticipating arrived in a box that was larger than expected and took 20 minutes to open. The delay was not a flaw. It was part of the experience. Number 13. The store employee who actually knew things. Circuit City's sales staff were paid on commission and trained on the products they sold. The guy in the home theater section had opinions, comparisons, and practical knowledge that came from fielding questions for 40 hours a week. You argued with him. Sometimes he was wrong. Mostly he was useful. Circuit City notoriously fired thousands of its most experienced, commissioned sales staff in 2003 to save money with cheaper hourly labor. The rationale was cutting costs. The side effect was removing expertise from the floor. Within 5 years, Circuit City was gone entirely. Today's retail employee is often a logistics worker who happens to be near a product. That's not the same thing. Number 12. The Electronics Store Demo Zone. Circuit City and Best Buy both maintained listening stations, demo TVs, and open box displays specifically so you could experience a product before buying it. You put on the headphones. You held the camera. You stood in front of the television that cost more than a month's rent and actually watched something on it. Physical retail built its entire value proposition around this. You couldn't hold the product on Amazon in 2001, and you still can't. What changed is that the demo zone lost customers to a price point, and when the customers left, the demo zone closed with them. Number 11. Toys R Us. It was a toy store the size of a warehouse, which meant it was, for any child under 12, the most important building in the world. The red and yellow sign, the animatronic Jeffrey the Giraffe, the entire aisle of action figures organized with a seriousness usually reserved for libraries. Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy in 2017 and closed all U.S. stores in 2018. Amazon and Walmart had spent years undercutting its prices. The company had also made a catastrophic strategic error in 2000, signing an exclusive deal to sell toys on Amazon's platform, then watching Amazon allow third-party toy sellers anyway, gutting Toys R Us's competitive position while helping build Amazon's. They sued. They won $51 million in damages. It wasn't enough. Halfway through, the next item is the one that changed not just where we shop, but how much we spend without noticing. Stay with me. Number 10. Checkout line friction. The checkout line was a commitment device. You stood in it, your cart full of choices, and during the wait, you reconsidered. The item at the bottom of the cart that seemed essential when you grabbed it looked less necessary by the time you reached the register. Sometimes you put things back. That reconsideration doesn't happen online. The friction of the physical checkout, the wait, the public visibility of your cart, the moment of handing over cash, created a psychological barrier that slowed impulsive spending. One-click purchasing removed it entirely. Behavioral economics research consistently shows that consumers who use friction-free digital payments significantly underestimate their spending compared to those who pay with cash or stand in line. Number 9. The record store listening station. Sam Goody, Tower Records, FYE, each had a rack of CDs with a listening station attached, a pair of headphones, a scanner, and a simple instruction. If you're not sure, listen first. You could hear the album before buying it. Tower Records filed for bankruptcy in 2006 and closed all 89 U.S. stores. At its peak, it was generating over $1 billion in annual revenue. Streaming didn't just replace the purchase, it replaced the discovery ritual. Spotify's algorithmic recommendations are statistically more efficient than a listening station. They are also considerably less interesting. Number 8. Borders. In the early 2000s, Borders operated hundreds of superstores across the United States. Each one was a neighborhood institution, a large, well-lit space full of books organized by human judgment, staffed by people who had read them, with a cafe attached that was not incidental, but central to the experience. You went to Borders without knowing what you wanted and left with something you wouldn't have found any other way. Amazon's recommendation algorithm produces similar results statistically, but browsing a physical bookstore involves peripheral vision, physical proximity, the weight of covers in your hand, and the specific kind of serendipity that happens when you pick something up because the spine caught your eye. Borders filed for bankruptcy in 2011, putting 10,700 people out of work in a single announcement. At the time of filing, it owed Amazon $41.2 million. Money it had paid Amazon to run its online storefront, while Amazon simultaneously used the traffic to build its own book business. It is possibly the single most self-defeating retail partnership in the history of American commerce. Borders handed Amazon its customers, Amazon learned from them, and then Amazon made Borders obsolete. The cafe is still there in memory. The building is a gym now. Number 7. Buying with cash. In 2001, the vast majority of physical retail transactions in the United States were still conducted using cash or paper checks. You handed over physical currency. You received change. The transaction had a tactile reality. You felt the money leave your possession. Behavioral economics research consistently finds that cash payments produce more psychological friction than card or digital payments, leading to more deliberate spending decisions. The transition to contactless payment didn't just change the mechanism, it changed the relationship between the purchase and the cost. Today, the most advanced payment systems are specifically engineered to be as frictionless as possible, to ensure that the moment between wanting something and having paid for it is as brief and painless as it can be. The pain was the point. Number 6. The video game trade-in. GameStop's trade-in economy was a complete ecosystem. You brought in games you'd finished, received store credit, and applied that credit to games you hadn't played yet. The transaction was physical, social, and surprisingly efficient. A secondary market for digital entertainment conducted entirely in a strip mall. GameStop still exists, but the trade-in economy has been systematically dismantled by digital distribution. A game purchased through Steam or the PlayStation Store cannot be traded. It cannot be resold. It cannot be lent. The disc you bought at GameStop in 2003 for $49.99 could circulate through a dozen households. The digital license you buy today dies with your account. Number 5. The pharmacist who knew your name. In 2001, most Americans filled their prescriptions at a local pharmacy, an independent store or a small chain where the pharmacist on duty knew your history, flagged potential drug interactions from memory, and called you by name when your prescription was ready. CVS and Walgreens consolidated much of this business through the 2000s, replacing local pharmacies with national chains that offered lower prices and longer hours. Amazon acquired PillPack in 2018 and launched Amazon Pharmacy in 2020, offering 2-day prescription delivery. The convenience is real. For people with mobility limitations or irregular schedules, it's genuinely better. What it replaced was a specific kind of professional relationship. The local pharmacist had context about you that existed in a human mind, cross-referenced in real time against a conversation they were having with you. That's structurally different from a database flag. Not every interaction requires that depth, but some do, and the ones that do tend to involve your medication. Number 4. Window shopping. You walked past a store. Something in the window caught your attention. You went in, handled the object, decided you didn't need it, and left without having spent anything. The entire interaction was free, in cost and in consequence. Window shopping required physical proximity to retail, which meant it only worked when retail was physically present in your community. Amazon's homepage is technically free to browse, but its entire architecture is optimized to convert browsing into purchasing. The window is designed to open automatically. Number 3. The mall food court. The food court was not a destination. It was a consequence. You went to the mall to shop, and at some point during the trip, you sat down at a table in a large, loud room and ate something that was not good for you and was exactly what you wanted. Sparrow, Orange Julius, Auntie Anne's, Chick-fil-A before Chick-fil-A was everywhere. The food court worked because the mall worked, because enough people were physically present in one building to sustain a dozen competing food vendors simultaneously. Industry analysts estimate that foot traffic in traditional American malls has plummeted by roughly 50% since its peak in the mid-2000s. The food court didn't fail. Its customer base went home and ordered delivery. Number 2. The return counter. Returning something you'd bought online in 2001 involved printing a label, packaging the item, and either dropping it at a post office or waiting for a pickup, a process sufficiently inconvenient that many people simply kept things they didn't want. Walking a defective or unwanted item to a customer service desk, handing it to a person, and receiving your money back the same day was so straightforwardly satisfying that retailers used it as a competitive advantage. Nordstrom built its brand largely on return policy. The physical return was not just a transaction, it was a resolution, a complete loop. Online returns are better than they used to be, but they still involve waiting for a label, finding a box, and trusting a process that might take 2 weeks to conclude. Number 1. The mall. In 1990, the United States had more shopping mall square footage per capita than any other country on Earth. At their peak, there were over 1,500 enclosed malls operating across the country. You didn't just shop at the mall, you met people there. You spent Saturday afternoon there for no particular reason. You had a pretzel from the pretzel stand and walked circuits around the same stores you'd walked past 100 times before. The mall was a third place, not home, not work, but somewhere. A climate-controlled public space that didn't require a purchase to enter, where you could encounter people you knew and people you didn't, where teenagers had somewhere to go, and older adults had somewhere to walk, and families had somewhere to spend time together that wasn't the house. We're going to do a full video on the mall, what killed it, what it cost us, and why the economic and social case for it was stronger than anyone admitted when it was dying. That episode is coming. But the short version is this: Amazon didn't just take our shopping, it took a place. And places, unlike products, cannot be delivered to your door. Shopping is more convenient now than it has ever been. The prices are lower, the selection is wider, the delivery is faster. All of that is true, and none of it is the point. What retail was at its best was a reason to leave the house, a destination that created the conditions for accidental encounters, unplanned discoveries, and the specific kind of satisfaction that comes from handling something before you own it. It was a built-in reason to be somewhere, with people, doing something that required your physical presence. Amazon optimized every part of that experience except the part that made it worth doing, and in the process, it didn't just take the shopping, it took the excuse. Which one on this list do you miss the most? Drop it in the comments. I read all of them, and if you want to go deeper on what happened to the internet itself during these same years, the websites that owned the early web before Google swallowed everything, that video is on screen now.